Has Chris Kreider played his final game as a member of the New York Rangers? Has Jacob Trouba?
You're Locked on the New York Rangers, your daily podcast on the New York Rangers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, Blue Shirts fans, to episode number 1190 of the Locked On New York Rangers podcast. I'm your host, John Chick. Just want to thank you guys, as always, for making Locked On New York Rangers your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you will get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, visit FanDuel.com to get started. And we are, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, wow, where do we even start here today? So, first of all, another just abomination of a performance by the Rangers last night against the St. Louis Blues, a 5-2 loss, a game where effort and grit and drive and just any semblance of guts was just completely lacking from the New York Rangers. Do you know why the St. Louis Blues won this game last night? There's a lot of reasoning that you can come up with. I understand that. But in a nutshell, putting this in the simplest terms that I possibly can, the reason the Blues won that game last night is because they outworked the Rangers, they out-hustled the Rangers, they out-executed the Rangers, and they were far better in crunch time, namely the third period, than the Rangers were. It's not because the Blues have a more talented roster than the Rangers. They don't. It's not even close. But they did all those things, and that adds up. Over the course of a 60-minute hockey game, the Rangers at no point in this game really played that well. I mean, their first period was okay, which was ironic because that's been probably their worst period, thus far in the season. Their slow starts have been an issue the entire year. Even when they were winning, the slow starts kept happening and happening and happening. Actually had a halfway decent start in this game, and the wheels fell off after that, especially in the third period. And, of course, you've got all these rumors that the Rangers want to shake up their core. There was a report from Elliot Friedman yesterday, I want to say like late morning, whenever it was, that, the Rangers might be looking to make a move. They've made it known that they're open for business, and that the two names at the top of the list as far as players that might be available from the Rangers are Jacob Trouba and Chris Kreider. It also mentioned, the report did, that, other things would be considered as well, as far as like other players that could end up getting traded. So we're going to talk about all that. Essentially, this is going to be part one of a two-parter because there is so much to discuss here between last night's game and all these trade rumors and the performance of some of these players. There's no way I can contain it to one episode. So with that said, let's go ahead and hit the ground running here. I'm going to spend the first chunk of this episode talking about Chris Kreider and whether or not he will be traded, whether or not I think that's a good idea. We're going to move on then to Jacob Trouba as well and talk about his just wonderful performance in last night's game. He was fantastic. And at the end, maybe a couple more highlights from this game. And certainly we'll talk about Berard, one of the very, very few bright spots from that game last night. But like I said, let's go ahead and start with Kreider. Interesting timing as far as Chris Kreider showing up on the injury report, wouldn't you say? Yeah, all of a sudden yesterday, we find out that Chris Kreider is day-to-day with an upper body. That doesn't even matter. Upper body injury, lower body injury, doesn't even matter. It really doesn't. Bottom line, he's day-to-day, or so the Rangers say. The timing of this is obviously very suspect because on the same day that we find out that Kreider is apparently dealing with some kind of an ailment, we also find out that once again, the Rangers are looking to shake up the core. And this is the tweet that was sent out by Elliot Friedman yesterday that kind of clued us all in that the Rangers might be looking to do something really big right now. This was the tweet, word for word here. In the aftermath of their 6-2 loss in Edmonton on Saturday, the Rangers have made it very clear they are interested in making moves and shaking up their roster. Among the names indicated are Chris Kreider and Jacob Trouba, although other options will be considered. So once again, if you're a little bit suspicious as far as the timing of this supposed injury to Chris Kreider, I don't blame you in the slightest. Now, it could be legit. I'm not going to sit here and say there's no chance that Chris Kreider is dealing with something and that, maybe they felt like a day off from whatever's ailing him. Maybe he'll come back a little bit refreshed and looking like some semblance of the player that we see from time to time when he's at his best, that we haven't seen a whole lot of this season. But I think it's also, again, very suspicious and entirely possible that Kreider was straight up benched in this game. This was a healthy scratching that they're just not going to call a healthy scratching because they don't want to show him up or throw him under the bus or hurt his feelings or whatever it might be. One reason or another, for kind of housekeeping purposes, they say that it's an injury to Chris Kreider. Again, Can't rule out the possibility that it is a legitimate injury, and that is why Chris Kreider sat last night. But if you're suspicious about that whole thing, like I said, I don't blame you for 2 seconds. And it also makes you wonder, the fact that Kreider sat out this game, maybe there's a trade that's a little bit closer to happening than we even realize. Because Chris Kreider, and a couple of you guys have pointed this out to me, and I completely agree with this, he's one of the few players that you can look at on this team that you could trade right now and actually get something back for him. If you tried to trade Jacob Trouba, it's a salary dump, and you're going to have to attach a sweetener. And don't worry, we'll get to Jacob Trouba a little bit later in today's episode. Keandre Miller's another one. I feel like you might be able to get something back for Keandre Miller if you wanted to shake things up by moving him. That's at least possible. But other than that, there's nobody really that's a trade candidate that's conceivable to be traded where you get something back for them. The biggest reason, though, why I'm not in favor of trading Chris Kreider is that this team, in theory, is trying to win a Stanley Cup this season. It sounds ridiculous saying that out loud after the way that this team has played over the last 3 games, but you were talking about a team that had the best record in the NHL last season. You were talking about a team that was 2 wins away from going to the Stanley Cup final, and you're talking about a team that's largely the same this year as last year, and honestly, on paper, they seem like they're a better team this year than last year. You go from Goodrow to Carrick, probably a little bit of a downgrade. You go from Roslovic to Smith, that seemed like an upgrade. Although Roslovic is tearing it up with the Canes, he gets away from Mika and Kreider. All of a sudden, he's a world beater. You've got Jones in for Gustafsson. I would say that's probably an upgrade too. There might be another small thing that I'm forgetting here, but regardless, I mean, you get the idea. On paper, I thought this team was slightly better coming into this season than it was going into last season. But again, in theory, they're trying to win a Stanley Cup. And if you do trade Chris Kreider, this is the reason why I'm against it, to bring everything full circle here. You are making your team worse. Unless you find some other team out there that has a really good, really talented player that could maybe come over to the Rangers in a 1-for-1 trade with Chris Kreider. I mean, do you call them maybe like change of scenery candidates? Maybe you could go with that as far as like labeling what that trade would be. But my thing is, like, if you trade Kreider for a draft pick, like, you just hurt your chances of winning the Stanley Cup this season. And as bad as things are, there's nothing here that's happened to the Rangers as a death sentence as of yet. Things look horrible right now. I'm not going to lie. And there's almost zero indications that this is going to get better anytime soon. I would love to be wrong about that. Watch them rip off 5 straight wins. Wouldn't that be something else? And then we'd all feel pretty foolish from being all doom and gloom. But when you watch this team play hockey, this isn't like January last year. Last year in January, the Rangers played very poorly, but it felt like the turn was always going to come. They were always going to dig their way out of the rut that they were in. They were always going to find a way to right the ship. Last year, it didn't really seem like a lack of effort or something being amiss in the locker room or a lack of leadership or anything like that. They just went through a bad stretch of hockey where they couldn't quite find that 5th gear, and they just weren't as sharp as they needed to be. And that can happen to any team in the NHL. And it happened to the Rangers last January. And from that point on, they were a great team again, finished with the best record in the regular season. I felt like they would turn it around last year. This year, watching these guys compete, if you can even call it that, it doesn't have that kind of feel that things are going to get better anytime soon. And again, I would love to be wrong about that. I would love to be able to look back on this and laugh after the Rangers win the Stanley Cup later this year. But what reason is anybody seeing to believe that that's going to happen? And as far as trading Kreider, again, he can fetch you a decent return. You could try to do just like a 1-for-1 trade with some other team around the NHL just to give your team a jolt, a serious jolt, and a shakeup of some kind. If you look at other big money, veteran, high profile players on this team, again, he's really the only one that makes sense to trade because you've got some guys with no move clauses. Panarin. I mean, I wouldn't trade Panarin, but I'm just listing him here for the purposes of being thorough. But guys with full no move clauses: Panarin, Mika, and Trocheck. So none of them are going anywhere. And even if Mika didn't have a no move clause of any kind, he's so atrocious right now, and he signed for so long, and he has such a high cap hit. There's no sweetener you could attach to Mika Zibanejad that would get any other team in this league to take him off of your hands. That's how bad it's been with Mika Zibanejad. Maybe I should have spent more time talking about Mika today, but we'll get to him in the episode after this one. Like I said, this is basically a glorified 2-parter here. I'm sure there's people that want to see Mika get traded. Would he consider moving his or waiving his no move clause? It doesn't matter. It's a moot point because of what I just said. There's not a single GM in hockey that would even consider picking him up right now. There's no chance. Not for all the salary retention. Even if the Rangers retained the maximum 50% of Mika's salary, I still don't think anybody's going to touch him right now. So that can't possibly happen. And as for Kreider, again, if you move on from him, you weaken your chances of winning the Stanley Cup. That's my kind of sticking point. And it's not because you see this on social media too. Like, there's some people that have this idea that, like, oh, well, you can't trade Chris Kreider because he's been here forever and he's one of the leaders, quote unquote, and all that stuff. That's not really what I'm hung up on, because you see people make that point, like, hey, even Wayne Gretzky got traded, right? That's not why I'm like against the idea of trading Chris Kreider. I know that anybody can be traded. I get that. I don't think there's a player in sports that's completely untouchable at any point in their career when it comes to a trade. But it's the very simple fact, again, the very practical reason that I think trading Kreider makes this team worse unless you get a big-time player in exchange for him. But Kreider hasn't played good. Like, what team is going to do that? Who's going to just trade one of their better players, one of their higher-paid players, one for Chris Kreider right now? I just don't see that happening. So I think you're better off just hoping that Kreider can get it together and eventually be the good Chris Kreider, the guy that we saw for chunks of last year's playoffs, the guy that we see for chunks of every season, up and down. You guys know how it is with Kreider, consistently inconsistent, and somebody that can really make you want to pull your hair out. One more stat that I'll leave you guys with when it comes to Chris Kreider, and a lot of you are aware of this, but I'll say it anyway. Chris Kreider does not have an assist all season, and he has 2 points at even strength. 2 points at even strength. We are 20 games into the season. He's played in 19 of them. He's got 2 points at even strength. All he's been doing all season is looking for deflections. And look, he's great at that. So he, by all means, should take advantage of that skill that he possesses. There's hardly anybody in the NHL that can deflect pucks as lethally as Chris Kreider can, but he's limiting himself because he's so much better than that. Where's the guy that turned into an absolute demon on skates last year in the playoffs against the Canes in Game 6, with the Rangers up against it and everything falling apart, up 3-0 in the series? It's now 3-2. You're down by multiple goals on the road against the Canes in Game 6, and Chris Kreider says, enough of all that. I'm going to take complete control of this game, and that's exactly what he did. Where's that guy? And I'm not saying that you have to treat every game of the regular season like it's Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final, but you have to give more than Chris Kreider has given. With all that said, though, I do think a trade of him does weaken this team, despite me having to obviously get that off my chest there. But we're going to switch our attention to the other big name that came up in trade talk for the New York Rangers, and that would, of course, be Jacob Trouba. And we are pulling no punches there, so yeah, don't miss that. We just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. PrizePicks now offers Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here on Locked On New York Rangers. Big shout out to the everydayers as always. As I mentioned, I think twice in that last segment there, this is going to be basically part 1 of a 2-parter. Now, for all I know, maybe the Rangers are finalizing a trade right here, right now, as I'm recording this. And obviously, if that happens, that's what we're going to talk about. But we're basically going to have part 2 of this because I can't contain everything that I need to say about this team right now to just one episode. With that said, let's move on to our fearless captain, Jacob Trouba. You know, there are fans of this team that will defend Jacob Trouba to the ends of the earth. He can do no wrong. He's big, and he's tough, and he's physical. So he's amazing. That logic is so flawed, and I'm going to expand on that in a little bit here. But you hear everything. You hear everything when it comes to people going to bat for Jacob Trouba. Now, this isn't the majority of the fans. I think most Ranger fans can watch this team and be honest with themselves and realize this guy has been bad this season and honestly has never even come close to living up to the contract, not even close. But you get from the Trouba supporters, man, you get everything from, come on, he's not really that bad to he's a great leader. I'm not even so sure about that anymore. And we're going to elaborate on that in a second here as well. you'll see people say things like, oh, Miller's even worse. Lindgren's even worse. Okay, you know what? They haven't been good either. I'm not cutting them any slack. But this is your captain. This is the guy making $8 million per season, paid to be a superstar player in this league, and he can't even give you competent hockey. He can't even go out there and not be a liability. So, yeah, Trouba is going to be a little bit more of a target for me than K'Andre Miller and Ryan Lindgren. It comes with the territory when you're the captain and when you're making $8 million per season. Not to mention the fact that he may or may not have sabotaged a trade that the Rangers tried to pull off this offseason. Not to mention the fact that this guy single-handedly lost playoff games for the Rangers in last year's run, particularly against the Panthers. And, again, everybody will just kind of, not everybody, but you know what I'm talking about. The Trouba supporters and the people that I kind of heard from a little bit after yesterday's episode. I did a segment yesterday. It's about 10 or 12 minutes. You can go on YouTube and watch it. It's a YouTube exclusive. Just talking about the idea of the Rangers maybe making a trade once those rumors had broken. But, you still get a few people in the comment section going to bat for Jacob Trouba and, how tough he is and how much he hits. Toughness and size and physicality and grit should not cost you $8 million per season if those are the only things that a player is bringing to the ice. You can find that for a heck of a lot cheaper than $8 million per season. I'm well aware of the fact that this is a physical game and you need guys that can throw down. You need guys that can go out there and grind. I get that. It shouldn't cost $8 million per season. There's no one on this planet that can tell me that it does. But I'm supposed to just go along with the idea of Jacob Trouba being this team's captain and making $8 million per year just because a couple of times a season he'll throw a couple of, really exciting open ice hits, half of which are borderline dirty, some of which are completely dirty, and some of which result in him either being fined or suspended. Yeah, no, he can do no wrong. Best captain in the league. And you know what? Here's the real kicker for those people. This is going to really keep the Trouba supporters up at night. Even the physicality, the one thing that everybody has to fall back on with Jacob Trouba, even me, there's times where on this podcast in the past, I've gone to bat for Jacob Trouba on here. The everydayers know that. The people that have been watching this podcast the last handful of seasons, you guys know that I've stuck up for Jacob Trouba more than the average Ranger fan. There's no doubt about that. However, the one thing that everybody hangs their hat on that continues to support Jacob Trouba, the pocket of fans that think that this guy can do no wrong, is that the physicality, the toughness, the grit, right? Okay. After this game last night, Jacob Trouba has played 20 games, all 20 games with the Rangers so far this season. Guess how many hits Jacob Trouba has this season? I'll give you a second. I want everybody to come up with a number in their head. I'll wait for a quick minute here. 20 games for Jacob Trouba this season. Guess how many hits he's had? Do you have a number? Good. Here we go. Jacob Trouba in 20 games with the New York Rangers this season has 31 hits. Oh, cool, man. 1.5 hits per game. He's really making an impact out there. Those 1.5 hits per game for Jacob Trouba, that's really leading the Rangers. They're going places. They're going places because Jacob Trouba, despite seeing no noticeable drop-off in his ice time, is out there averaging 1.5 hits per night. Yeah, try again. He's got, coming into this game last night, 4 takeaways against 19 giveaways. Show me anything positive. Show me anything this guy is doing well right now. And, the one thing, too, is that there's people that, again, they will continue to defend this guy. For the Trouba defenders, I have a very simple question. Did you watch this game last night? Did you see how he played? This is your captain. Your captain doesn't necessarily have to be the best player on the ice. Sometimes, oftentimes even, the captain is not the best player. He's the captain because he's the guy that's going to go out there and set a tone and hold guys accountable and give them a kick in the you-know-what if they need it and play their heart out every single game. You're not getting that from Jacob Trouba right now. Your captain doesn't necessarily have to be your best player. Your captain damn sure can't be your worst player. And that's what Jacob Trouba is right now. I'm not even talking about relative to the cap hit. If you look at player production on this team versus what they're making per season, that makes it look really bad for Jacob Trouba. Jacob Trouba could be making $2 or $3 million a season. We have the same problem because he's a tremendous liability every time that he's on the ice. I'm sorry. I don't have a nice way to say any of these things. The first goal last night. Did you see Jacob Trouba on this play? Everybody that keeps defending him. Now it's partially on Mika too. And as far as, worst player on the team, Mika's giving Trouba a heck of a run for his money right now. But you got Mika chasing a puck back into the Ranger zone. He passes off the boards behind the net out to Trouba on the other side. Mika very clearly did not put enough zip on this pass. The puck was slow getting to Trouba. I don't know if Mika I mean, he probably just didn't anticipate that anybody would forecheck, given that he never does. But before you know it, the puck's going to Trouba, and an opponent is all over Trouba at that time. Even with the suspect pass here, though, Trouba still had positioning. He was still very clearly the closest to the puck, and he ends up, somebody smaller than him takes the puck away from him. Trouba's falling all over himself, falls down to the ice, couple of passes. I think it might have just been one pass after that, but the goal is scored. And just like that, the game is tied at 1-1. And as far as blame Mika, blame Trouba, blame both of them. It's on both of them. It was a bad play. Something else that I noticed too, because again, you're going to have Ranger fans talk about what a warrior this guy is, right? Okay. First period. Scrum behind the Blues net. You've got Adam Edstrom taking a penalty for boarding. The Blues didn't like that. 3 players on the Blues jump on Adam Edstrom. They're all over him. All of them are kind of, shoving him down to the ice. He's on the ice. He's pretty much defenseless. They're all surrounding him. Capo Caco jumps right in there, trying to defend his teammate. Riley Smith, he got there. He eventually got there. He was the second Ranger to get there. Ryan Lindgren eventually entered the camera. Didn't really do anything, but at least he came over. Jacob Trouba was on the ice at this time. He was nowhere to be found. I know Jacob Trouba isn't the fastest player on the ice, but I think there was plenty of time for him to get there from, the whistle blowing to everything that happened there. And I'm reaching a little bit here. I'll admit that. This is a little bit of a nitpick and a little bit of a stretch. But if this guy is really this big, tough, universally feared defenseman who's just an absolute warrior on the ice, where was he here? Somebody that fits that description is going to stick their nose in there and start pulling guys off of their teammate, their rookie teammate, who's down on the ice, basically being mugged by 3 players on the Blues. Trouba was nowhere to be found on this play. And the same thing happened at the end of the second period. The temperature really rose. It's 2-2 at this point in the game. And you've got a big scrum at the end of the period. Cooley was in there. Rempe was in there. Even Igor, he kind of mixed it up with Hofer while he was leaving the ice there. Trouba came over, but didn't really look all that engaged. And I know you can't just like jump on people and start punching them and take a penalty. I get that too. But I mean, grab somebody, do something. He just didn't look engaged. It's bad when Arthur Staple, a credentialed New York Ranger reporter, says the following on Twitter. This is what he said after the second goal that was allowed by the Rangers. And you'll be shocked to learn that Jacob Trouba was indeed on the ice for this one too. So was Lindgren. So was Mika Zibanejad, the same 3 offenders from every game. But this is what Arthur Staple had to say after that play. More horse bleep play below the dots in the D zone by the Rangers. And Baldu flutters one over Shesterkin. 2-1 St. Louis. Lindgren Trouba struggled mightily that shift. So Arthur Staple coming off the top rope there, a credentialed Ranger reporter just shreds this team to pieces, and he's not wrong for doing so. And again, you'll be shocked to learn that Lindgren and Trouba were indeed on the ice. Boldu looked like a world beater out there. He was a healthy scratch in the most recent game for the Blues, and these Ranger defensemen can't even control him. They can't even slow him down. He looked great. He looked better than just about any... I mean, I was going to say forward or like top 6 forward. Basically, Boldu looked better than just about any Ranger player on the ice in this game last night. So, I don't know. There's more examples from this game that I can go to if I'd like. I mean, I think I've made my point and my feelings very clear on what the Rangers are getting out of Jacob Trouba so far this season. And one more point that I'll make here on Trouba is, how about the way that the Rangers started the third period? How about the way they just played in the third period in general? You're 2-2 here. You haven't played great, but you've lost 2 in a row. There's all this drama surrounding the team, all these fireworks, all these things going on. You got to win a period to win a game. It reminds me of the old Laviolette clip that surfaces every now and then, back when he was on, Road to the Winter Classic as coach of the Flyers. And he's saying, you win a period, you win a game. He gave them a fiery speech and was trying to motivate them. And that's what he said. Rangers are in the same situation here. You win a period, you win a game. And you talk about desperately needing a win based on everything that's happened so far. This team comes out in the third period flat as a pancake. The Blues scored 2 goals in the third period before the Rangers even put 2 shots on net. And the Rangers were just slow, constantly pinned in their own zone. I mean, maybe Trouba did say something in the locker room. I don't know. I'm not in there. Maybe somebody did stand up and say something. Maybe Trouba is trying to motivate his guys. Maybe his message for some reason is falling on deaf ears. But even if that is the case, it doesn't excuse his poor play. And it does not excuse what happened after this game either. And I don't care what anybody says. This matters. There's going to be some people saying that this is insignificant and, it's not really that big of a deal. You're entitled to your opinion. I very respectfully disagree. What happened after this game, what I'm talking about here, is that nobody on the Rangers that wears a letter was anywhere to be found after this game was over to face the music and answer questions from the media. The only exception was Artemi Panarin. Panarin, kind of called out his team. It was kind of generic quotes, which you would typically expect. They're not going to like bury individual teammates or anything like that. But Panarin at least faced the music. I mean, he didn't play great in this game either. Nobody really did. But he faced the music. No Trouba, no Trocheck, no Fox. Who did I forget? No Mika. Yeah, Mika's going to face the music after a game like that. Yeah, I bet. Panarin faced the music. Lafreniere talked to the media. Other than that, I don't know. But again, this tremendous leader here, Jacob Trouba, nowhere to be found after a game that the Rangers absolutely had to win, after a game in which he played very poorly. And by the way, hell of an example to set for Brett Berard. Brett Berard is making his NHL debut. He's excited. He's got 40, I think they said 40 members of his family and or friends in the building for this game. He's excited. He played really well. We're going to talk about Brett Berard. Again, one of the few shining lights of this game and this recent stretch of play here. So I don't know. I mean, between Trouba and Trocheck and Fox and Mika, who all bounced after this game without answering any questions, what are the Rangers supposed to do? Is Brett Berard supposed to talk to the media and try to figure out why this team sucks lately? Cut me a break. I'm sorry, man. Jacob Trouba, this is up there for me. You guys know, the everydayers, the people that have been with me, for a long time on this podcast, you guys know this is not my style to go after one player like this. He's been atrocious, and I'm just sick of it. I'm tired of having to defend him as I've done in the past. I'm tired of the lackluster play and whatever version of leadership that this was that we saw from Jacob Trouba last night. I would say this is up there. I'm trying to think about like times I've really gone in on players. It's either this or at the end of the playoffs with Trouba, this most recent run, that's got to be number one. That's number one and number two in any order you want to put them. Mika, kind of let him have it a little bit earlier this season. It's usually not my style, but that's where things are with this Ranger team right now. That's how things are going. And Jacob Trouba just not cutting it in any way, shape, or form for this team right now. But we're going to shift our attention in just a second to Brett Berard. Like I said, thought he got a solid debut. Let's try to end with something positive. Once again, one of the only positive things to come out of this game. All right, we just want to take a minute to let everybody know that today's episode of Locked On New York Rangers is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You will get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, let's go ahead and keep everything rolling here. On Locked On New York Rangers, like I said, want to shift our attention to Brett Berard. And honestly, man, it's sad that his debut, which was a good debut, I thought he was the second best forward on the ice for the Rangers after only Will Cooley. I'd put Berard right there at number 2. And that's not even, again, like grading against expectations or looking at what their cap hit is. No, strip all that away. The second best forward on the ice for the Rangers in this game, in my very humble opinion, was Brett Berard. Kakko was good too. I thought he had a strong game. The Kakko line in general, I thought, was pretty solid. One of the better games we've seen Riley Smith play in a while. Adam Edstrom got a chance on the third line. I thought he looked good, at least at times. Honestly, maybe it's just compared to everybody else. I mean, I don't know. But bottom line, Brett Berard had all his friends, all his family there in the building. What did they do to be subjected, to be deserved to be subjected to whatever this was from the Rangers in this game last night? But Berard did everything he could. He did his best. He actually got the start in this game, got his first assist, the secondary assist on the second goal by Will Cooley. Berard actually got to start this game. They put him out there with Mika and with Cooley. That was the second line, listed as the second line for the Rangers in this game. So I like that. Start Berard, let him hit the ground running, let him get a few shifts under his belt. Don't let him sit around on the bench and think about it too much. Just get out there and go. They, of course, were joined. That trio was joined by Ryan Lindgren and Jacob Trouba, because God forbid we start a game or a period this entire season where Ryan Lindgren and Jacob Trouba are not on the ice for the opening faceoff. We can't have that. We can't go with anybody except for those two at the start of a period. But, Berard, again, I thought he had a good first shift here. There was a play where right after the faceoff, the Blues got possession and a good stick by Berard in the neutral zone to break up a pass. He also, a little bit later in the shift, gloved down a puck that was in the air in the neutral zone, was able to dump it deep and then chase after it. Oh, look, a Ranger forechecking. That's good. And then of course the assist that he had. This is all the result of hard work and grinding along the boards and battling for a puck. You had Will Cooley going in on the forecheck like he was fired out of a cannon into the corner, bodies his guy, gets control of the puck. Cooley started to carry it up the boards, and then he sent it back down around the corner behind the net to Brett Berard. And Berard, who was giving up a good amount of size to the defenseman that he was matched up with on this play, he basically bodied him too, kind of shielded him away from the puck almost, and then comes away with it. Berard, like that, quick as a hiccup, tries to score on a wraparound, unable to do so. The rebound goes to Mika. Mika passes to the other side to Cooley, and Cooley scores into the wide open net. And just like that, the Rangers tied the game at 2 at that point. But this was all blue-collar hard work from Will Cooley and Brett Berard. That caused the whole thing here, and it stands out so much because there are so few Ranger players that are willing to play like that right now. There's so many guys that are in a funk right now that they're just not going to make plays like that. And you know what's really telling? During this game, I think it was kind of toward the start of the game, they're talking about, obviously Berard making his debut, and Will Cooley's been really good, and let's talk about these new line combinations. All well and good, all the kind of things you expect announcers to discuss before a game and the early goings of a hockey game. Joe said something that to me was so telling, and I don't think he was taking a shot at Mika Zibanejad, but it almost sounds like maybe a little bit, kind of subtly. He said something like, he's talking about Cooley and Berard here. He said something about the style of play that they play, playing a blue-collar, hardworking style of hockey, and he said maybe they can drag Mika along with them. Now, again, I don't think he meant this as an insult, but that's where we're at right now, man. That's how things are going for this team. We need our supposed number one center, the guy making $8.5 million per season, who's signed from now until the end of time. We need him to be dragged along by a 23-year-old, I think Cooley's 23, a 23-year-old Will Cooley, who's in his second season in the NHL, and a 22-year-old fifth-round rookie in Brett Berard, who's making his NHL debut. Our superstar center needs to be dragged along by those two to, I don't know, put in something resembling an honest effort during these games. Really let that sink in, man. I had some other things I was thinking about talking about. Berard played well. I mean, again, he was engaged and he was noticeable on the ice. And one of the scouting reports about him is that, he plays a lot bigger than his frame would indicate that he would, because he is one of the smaller players out there for sure. I think that thought that I just shared about Mika Zibanejad, though, I think we can pretty much end on that. I'll give you one more thought to close out today's episode. I tweeted this earlier today, too. Who do you got for the Stephen McDonald Extra Effort Award this season? I got 3 people that I can rule out right away. Mika Zibanejad, Chris Kreider, Jacob Trouba. I don't think the 3 of them are exactly front runners for anything involving effort so far this season. And as far as who actually will win it, I mean, I might as well answer the question in a positive way, because I try to be positive on here, but what's gone on lately, it's nearly impossible. But to answer that question, talk about something kind of fun and kind of lighter at the end of today's episode, who should win the award? Cooley. Will Cooley has to be the hands-down favorite to win the Extra Effort Award. And I've got 3 honorable mentions that I'll throw out there as well. Capo Caco, Jonathan Quick, and I'll say Zach Jones, too. Jones could be a dark horse. Jones deserves all the credit in the world for extra effort and persevering and going out there and playing solid hockey. This guy had to sit for years behind defensemen who can't hold a candle to him right now. He was behind the Ryan Lindgrens of the world, the Jacob Troubas of the world, the Keandre Millers of the world, the Eric Gustafsons of the world. There might have been 4 Ranger defensemen last year who were all mainstays in the lineup, none of whom were as good of a player as Zach Jones. And Jones hung in there, and he's finally in this lineup. And if he ever comes out again, Ranger fans are going to riot, and rightfully so. He sat down a recent game, but that was injury-related. So if he's ever a healthy scratch again, watch out. Ranger fans, that might be the last straw and the breaking point for certain Ranger fans. But Yep, figure we can call it there. Like I said, as far as I'm concerned, this is part one of a two-parter. I'll be back here recording a little bit later today. Gonna wait and see if the Rangers make any moves, because if they make a trade, then obviously we gotta talk about that. But yeah, either way, gonna be back behind the mic and talking about some other things. Peter Laviolette, Keandre Miller possibly being traded, a whole bunch of other stuff as well. But I need a breather after that one. So thank you guys as always for tuning in. If you'd like to get in touch with this podcast, please send an email to lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Once again, that is lockedonnyrangers@gmail.com. Definitely send us or give us a follow on Twitter at LO_NY_Rangers. Once again, at LO_NY_Rangers. And definitely subscribe to Locked On New York Rangers YouTube channel. Thanks again, guys. I will see you next time.